Hi, welcome back to my channel. I hope you'll stick around today and paint these poppies in a teacup with me. Today I'm using my Simi-Art and Sonnet watercolors. I have my size 6 flat and round Intuition brushes by Artigria, and I also have a size 3 round brush that I'm using. I have my watercolor palette handy, 2 jars of water, one for rinsing my dirty brushes and the other for painting. And I have my 350 GSM watercolor paper. This is pre-cut into a 4x5. Let's get started. So to start, I just want to take my flat brush and I want to start brushing in some pigment all around this teacup. I've already drawn my outline here. And I'm just using the very corner of my brush around that handle. And I think it should work. Ordinarily I use a round brush for this, but I thought that this would really be fine. So again, I am truly just loving these poppies lately. They're such a great thing to paint in the fall, and they're just still so cheerful. You know, they're just a fun flower, and they're so easy for watercolor. They just turn out so well. So I thought this time I'll do them in my little teacup, which I also love to paint. I do think these little teacup paintings make such a cute little cheerful card. I would like to try one of these in a bigger size and just see how it goes, and you know, maybe have it ready for a gift, or you know, something like that. I think that would be fun. And maybe a whole set of them. Okay, so I have quite a bit of water up here. I'm just noticing in the light, so I'm just kind of pulling that across. This paper can get a little, it can lift a little, it can, the texture can kind of start to, oh, I don't know if lift is the right word, but some of the texture kind of starts to lift. I think that is. But as it dries, it just dries beautifully, and I don't know. There are certainly people who do not think that this Dollar Tree paper is, you know, so great. And, you know, maybe because I've never used Arches or anything fancy. I mean, I've never used anything fancy. Canson is about the most I've ever spent on paper. But I'm so happy with it. I think it just always dries nice, and of course you want to work with it. You want to kind of see how it behaves and how it handles things, but I just think it's a fun paper. So here I want to go in with my Ocean, and I want to use it because it's just a nice indigo, and I think that is, you know, that's such a good background color, and with the reds I think it's really going to look nice. Here's the other reason. I wanted this time to have a background color that would not be quite so reactive with my red, and some of the blues, in particular the the periwinkle that I use, which is called a lavender by, it's a Simi Art color. It causes some granulation in the Madder Lake Red that I use, which I'm not going to be using today, but I didn't really want to swatch this out and see how that color would behave with the red. I also I think that this is going to be a better color for it. I think the combination will be better. But that granulation and just how different colors behave with each other is something that I don't know a lot about, but you know, it's one of those things that you'll observe. You see it happen, and then you just have to kind of be aware of it. And it may vary across paints. Again, not knowing, I do not know how common that is. I kind of took a little corner of this, so this little pedestal will have less of that little curve there, I think. And you know, just keeping this nice and loose. Whoa, that's a lot of pigment. So fun. Really, just so fun. Let's blend this around a little bit. Okay. I'm in a slightly different setup than usual. The way my desk faces, I'm turned because I'm working at night and I'm using my overhead light, which, you know, I prefer when I paint in the day. I prefer to use my window light, and I do like that, but I like to paint at night too. I just like to paint. So if I get a chance, then I just want to come in here and paint if I can. And so yeah, the light's a little different, but I have my candle, and it's just a nice evening for that. Okay, I'm noticing that I have some chalky bits of this pigment. I just maybe did not quite work it on my palette quite as much as maybe I needed to, so just kind of be aware of that as I'm grabbing more pigment and trying to work that in just a little bit more, and just blending, blend. If it needs more water, just get more water. This is maybe going to push some of this, but that's okay. I do not mind those layers in that. You know, sometimes I'm going to work to not have it, but I like to have that texture in the background, and I like to have places where you kind of see some layers of paint, and you know, it's not perfect. I just like that it looks kind of vintage, I think, For me, it does. And I don't want to overdo it in here because I want to have, I want to retain some red, but here's the thing. I don't think that I'm going to mind some of the melding of the red and blue. On the poppies, you know, I might regret it because poppies are, you know, they're so warm, and obviously this background being quite cool. But I just really did want a background this time, and I just want to see how it does. Excuse me. I like the Madder Lake red on the blues. I like that I end up with kind of a nice orchid, maybe. I just think that's pretty. But this is just kind of an experiment for me tonight to see how this does. I don't know how it's going to go. And we'll just kind of see together. How about that? Okay, I love that. I do think maybe I need a little more over here. Not a ton, but just needed a little more. And that's really quite, still quite wet, yay. So it's blending very well. And then I think I want to take just a little bit more up here. I don't mind those little brush stroke marks. I like this. I kind of think I need more of that up in the top, so hopefully I have that still wet enough, but because there's just so much texture down here, just gotta get some of that in there. Nice. Yeah, I think that's working. A little more over here. Okay, love it. Just kind of soften some of that. Okay, and one more thing before I start these florals. I think that I want to do inside the handle. Okay, love that. And I'm okay with it being quite, you know, just, oh, imperfect back there. I didn't want it smooth at all anyway. But you know how you will see photos or even old, you know, very much old restored homes, and you know, they can have these vintage walls and paints, and it's just imperfect, and you know, you see those in movies, and it's just you know, very very imperfect, but very loose and free, and I think often very beautiful. So maybe a French villa, a chateau. Okay, so I love that. I want to just kind of leave it and get started on these poppies. And what I want to do here is I want to use my, I'm thinking I might use my cherry red. Now ordinarily I do these with more of a garnet. I don't know, maybe I'll swatch it out. What do you think? Let's swatch this and see. I'm really quite concerned I'm going to regret so much here by not leaving my background a little cleaner. You know what I can do here? I can actually maybe lift a little bit of this. If I just wet it with enough clean water, just lift some of it. Okay, let's see what happens. Maybe a little, I'm not sure. Maybe. I wanted to be careful not to stamp my towel back into my cup because I do want it to be white. Okay. And then I swatched my indigo here. And that is the cherry red. Which I'm inclined to go with because it is just a slightly cooler red. But garnet might be doable too. See, I think maybe the garnet is going to be fine. Let's just try the garnet. Okay. Look at me, actually trying to plan something. Yay. All right. I'm going to take this garnet. Now, I tell you what, these Simi-Art pigments, they're not all this way, but this red that I'm using, the garnet, it is so creamy. Such a good color to work with. I really, you know how you have some paints that are just, you know, there's not a bad one in the bunch, and you never have a bad experience. I kind of feel like I never have a bad experience with this. It is a good paint. Okay, I've just made my, you know, my messy centers as I do, and then, you know, a couple of petals, just these little wiggly, scraggly. I'm not worried about how much they look like poppies, because I'm going to come in with some water, and these are going to be really loose and more the idea of poppies. And So, you know, it's nothing that has to be too defined or anything like that. Maybe one kind of hanging out here. And I try to keep my little arrangements a little bit asymmetric. Why don't we have a little bud here? Maybe a little bud here. And I like this. Maybe one, just a hint of one over here. Now help me remember that that's a bud. Okay, now I'm going to go in with plain water. I don't know if you can see, these are still, you know, they're shiny, they're still wet. I'm dragging my brush across the rim of my jar so that I do not, I don't take too much water with me. And then I'm just touching around these centers where I think it would look good to have some pigment start bleeding. And I noticed here I had to kind of help that, and that's okay. You can do that. Sometimes, you know, if you're working on another pigment, for example, the blue, the reactivating of another color on top of that can just sometimes, you know, it can need a little encouragement. I really had a lot of water in that, but it seems to be doing okay. These are releasing very easily over here. Now these are also probably a little more wet. And I'm really, gosh, had too much water on there. Not watching that. I say I'm being careful, and then I am not being as careful as I think I've been being. And that's okay. Look who's not worried about it. Oh, did I forget? I sure did. I forgot that that's a bud, and I was not brushing it. But here's the thing. It's really okay. This can, it can be loose, and it can be kind of, the pigment can be kind of spreading or bleeding, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go right here. I'm going to wet it. I'm going to see if I can dab that pigment out, and see, I think that works. I really try not to sweat stuff, and you know, you forget. I forget. I like these so far, and I'm happy to say I like them on the blue, and I'm not regretting that decision. It's nice not to regret decisions. Gosh, especially with art. Okay. That might have been a little early to add that pigment, but if it bleeds, it bleeds. I want to add a little more water up here, maybe. Just trying to get these nice fades, I guess. Just some areas where we have the look of overlapping layers of petals. That's what I'm going for there. And I like it. I like that really well. Now, I'm going to be honest, this one I don't really know what's going on, but I'll develop that better when I add another layer of petals, but I'm just not even worried about it. I'm going to take my Payne's Gray for a shadow. And actually, no, before I do that, clean off my brush really well and just start to brush water into my cup, because I want to give this just the tiniest bit of shadow. And I don't plan to go all the way across the entire cup, so I'm just using a small amount of Payne's Gray. And I swatched this on my little card over here, just to be sure that I was not getting an overwhelming amount, because I have done that recently and I was not thrilled with it. I mean, it was fine, but you know, if I don't want it that way, then you know, just kind of checking it beforehand, that can be helpful. So now I'm just taking some water and blending at this. Oh, I like it. And I don't even mind this tiny bit of red that's come into the cup right there. And I'll tell you why, because I think a lot of times, especially with something white, you'll have little bits of color reflecting inside of that, and so why fight it? I mean, if a little bit of your color is, you know, bleeding onto your painting, it may actually be okay if it's bleeding onto a part that, well, it can be okay anyway, all right? But especially if it's, you know, if you can think of that as, this is a shadow and it makes sense to have that. Sometimes those things, those happy little accidents, really, you know, they really make a difference, and they might not be things that we would add, but they end up just being, just adding an element of I don't know, just not necessarily realism, but they're believable, maybe. Okay, this is okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and dab that out. I have a bit more gray in there than I want, and I'll just come back when that's a little, maybe a little drier. I'm not sure. I don't know what I'm doing. It really is true. Okay, I love this. Just that hint of shadow there. Really, I don't want more than that. I'm gonna go, well, let me tell you, I was gonna add some shadow at the bottom. I'm gonna wait till my cup is dry. And so I'm kind of at a tricky spot, because my flowers are still quite wet, and maybe too wet to start working on greens and leaves, but maybe not. Maybe we can do that. But I don't want to add the shadow below the cup yet, because I just don't want to lose this shadow, and I just don't want to do it. So Okay. So I'm going to start some greens. And I think what I'll do is switch from my size 6 brush to my size 3. And I'll be using my olive green, shocker. Do love this olive green. I have so many things going up here. And my layout, because I've situated myself a little differently, and you know, I've been having trouble with kind of knocking my phones and my phone holders with my brush, that I just have a more spread out situation than I ordinarily do. So bear with me, please. Okay, just start right here. These, I think, are kind of they're kind of a jaggedy, pointy kind of leaf. I like that. That's fine. I'm like being a little extra critical of that over here, and then realizing that, you know, maybe it's okay. And I seem to have absorbed my little bud there into this next flower, and I'm just not going to fight that. I think it's all right, and you know, not what I intended, but you know, sometimes you play the ball where it lies, and it's okay that it did that. And you know, I can maybe figure out some other way to incorporate another bud, but I'm not worried about it. I do not want a ton of bleeding into these reds, so yeah, if I see something like that happen, I'm going to try to take care of it. Okay, and you know, remember, not every flower has to have a stem. They really don't have to. Just whatever seems to make sense to you. And, you know, if you think you need one for all of them, be my guest. But don't do it just because you think you have to, because you actually don't. But this guy up here does have to have a stem. And I like to make a little, like a leaf, probably. I don't know, it's like a little covering. Okay. All right, I'm loving it. Okay, just see where I can add some more leaves. And then I want to go in and start adding some more layers to my poppies. Okay, I like so far. It's working. I want to go ahead and make those extra layers, I think, for my poppies. And then I'll come back and add more leaves, but really this makes sense because some of the layers that I add may be where I would have put a leaf, and I don't want to do that. I want the focus to be the flowers. Okay. I'm going to check that. Get just a little more of this ready on my palette. And I know a lot of people will get their colors pre-ready on their palette, but I just find they dry kind of fast, and so I just prepare colors kind of as I go, as I paint. So kind of look and see what I already have, and so I just try to kind of go with that. I don't want to fight it, you know. Okay. And I'm not worried about every little detail. Just having fun with it. Remember, I'm going to have these black centers. And you can go back and soften some of this up. I often do that. So great, it just gives you really more and more layers. You just take a bit of water and go and kind of touch where you've added some overlapping petals. This is kind of a giant mess over here, mostly because a lot of it is in this blue. And that's okay, it kind of, in that, kind of fades into the background. So, no worries. Okay. Then I just want to take some water and soften a bit of that up, just here and there. Remembering to drag off of the side. So fun. These really are just so fun to do. And I do think really the key is just not to worry too much about them. Just keep it relaxed. Add just, you know, add your initial pigments, soften them. I love these. I'm super happy with this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do this shadow. I'm going to switch my brush for that just because I think, well, I don't think I want a teeny tiny shadow. And I want to have just a little bit coming off this left side. I'm just wetting this so that when I add the pigment, it can just kind of bleed into that. I'm using my Payne's Gray for this. You could use the background color, I think. You know, that's safe to do and gives a good look. I think it has a good result. I might need just a little more actual pigment in that. Mostly up at the line of, you know, where the teapot meets the shadow. Yeah, I like it. And I just want to blend this, I think, just a little more. Okay, I like it. And maybe dab at this side just a little. Okay. And then I think a few more leaves, and if I can figure out another place to add another bud, I will, but I do not want to try to have, I don't want to have any symmetry. And so that's kind of the only thing, and I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if there's not another one. It's okay. My concern would be, does it stick out like a sore thumb? And I don't think it does. I also this ended up a little darker than I would like. So I'm just painting over it with some water. And I'm going to go in with my tea towel and dab that. And I think that's okay. That lifted out some of that pigment. I'm trying to be real careful because I don't want to lift from my flowers there. And then just kind of blending this in just a little. And then I almost need to go back with a little bit of pigment right there. But no worries. Okay. Maybe a few more leaves if I can figure them out. But honestly, I'm kind of okay with what I have. I might just do some real light leaves kind of coming out of the background. Maybe some things down in here. Let's see. Sometimes they're so hard for me. There we go. So just some little light ones. Just kind of help flesh that out. Okay, I like it. Let's see. Yeah, and just adding some little marks in here, just some tiny little strokes here and there. Nothing too obvious or, necessarily even a shape. Just some things to kind of fill some of that white. Just gives it a little more depth and a little more texture. It's really easy to do. Just kind of looking for little light areas that just still need a little something. And maybe one kind of light leaf over here. There we go. Just little peeking out from behind that. And now I do think I'd like some yellow in these, in the centers of these poppies. So I'm just taking a bit of my Yellow Deep. And I'm just going in these centers, and then I want to come back, and I'm not trying to fill the entire center, mostly because I don't want the red to just bleed into that. But just putting it in these centers, and I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll come back and dot around with the black. And it really does not matter if this does bleed with the red. That's going to be a-okay. It's totally fine. It will still look amazing. I pretty much love everything about this. Am I entirely in love with this like ferning or whatever there? Maybe not. And maybe while this is drying a bit here, I could maybe work on that a little. Now listen, I don't know that I can really improve it, but maybe if I just wet it and kind of put some pigment back into it. But that generally happens as a result of adding water in an area that has a good amount of pigment, and it just pushes that pigment. And even if you have pigment on your brush, like, that's just very easy to do. And it's something I like to watch for. I think sometimes it looks really neat, really interesting, and sometimes it's something I'd want to avoid. So and I think that's helping. And then I'll probably come back after I've done my centers and just brush a little bit in those, in kind of these areas up here around my florals, just to kind of fill that a little. Could actually kind of do some of that now. And what I just like to do here is just some brush strokes. I don't concern myself too much with whether I'm avoiding my artwork, my florals, and I don't worry about that. I generally am just pretty okay with it. I don't want to lose all of my detail, but I'm okay with kind of just scrubbing into that. like it. All right, and then I'm not sure if I need to clean up down here too. Let me just go ahead and do that. Clean it up just a little bit. Just adding some water in here. I don't want to completely ruin my shadow, but okay, my goal here is really, it's not perfection, but I do want to just, I want to have a, you know, cohesive work. So I kind of feel like this down here needs to go with what's going on up there. It can't just do its own thing. I mean, it could, but I don't think I want it to. Yeah, I like it. It's a little better. Okay. Not too bad. And I like that better without that big bloom up there. I hope this really did handle it. You know, sometimes those things seem to kind of come back, so we'll just see. I'm going to take just a very light wash of that blue, really, really light, and not a lot of liquid, excuse me, on my brush, and just some little brush strokes in these white areas. Now, I do not think the whole thing needs to be filled with blue, and I'm not trying to do that, but the places where I just notice, you know, gosh, that's really a big amount of white or whatever, and you know, you kind of wouldn't see that because number one, the background, but also, you know, there'd be some shadows in there. And I don't always do this. Of course, I don't always have a background either. But yeah, I like that. I think for me, that improved things. And maybe a little bit extra down here where we would have a little more shadow because, you know, goodness, we've got all these flowers. Fun, 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 fun. This almost looks like it doesn't have yellow in it, and I know it has to, but it would not be the first time I completely overlooked something in a painting. Okay, back to my size 3 and just going with my black. I'm going to avoid this flower for now. And I don't want to have a lot of water on my brush. I really want to have more pigment, and then I want to be real careful because it's hard to get a good point if you have a lot of water. Also, doing these little dots, you don't want a surprise glob of water rushing down onto your painting there. So So just thinking about where your centers would be, and then just dotting around those. And you do not have to do a complete, I'm not doing circles really, and you do not have to do a complete shape, you know, for the center of your flower. Sometimes the petals, some of the petals are blocking some of that, so you wouldn't necessarily, and you know, so think about that. I think that's the kind of thing that just adds a little more character. And, you know, not that I don't tend to go for a lot of realism, but it helps to be just one more identifier, I think, for what you're painting. And so just these crazy, dotty, imperfect centers. Stay nice and relaxed. But see what I mean about, you know, not having to do the entire circle or center. These are so fun. And I tend to not do these as a circle, and I feel like they tend to be more of an oval. So fun. I think it could be cute to do an entire arrangement with more of that blue background, but that will be for another day. Okay, last one. Oh my gosh, I love these. Really, all the love. So I would call that done. And I had really just one of the most delightful times painting this. It was really fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed watching and painting. And if you didn't paint, I hope you'll save it, paint it later, let me know how it goes. And as always, happy painting.